I'm Team Visintainer. As a family, I've lived in Moffat County for over 100 years. My mother's folks came to Moffat County in about 1912. My dad came in about 1905 in the western part of the county. And we've lived here and have a ranch, or have a ranch that covers quite a little in Moffat County, or over a large area from down on Snake River to up on Black Mountain. And I'm married and have 4 children. Denise Syke is my daughter. Gary is my son. He's a veterinarian here in town. Well, my dad came to be a coal miner in Rock Springs, and it was different than it is today, a lot different. And he ended up without a job, and he went to work on a ranch, and from there and that was 1905 when he came to Rock Springs. But he migrated south into Moffat County. And my mother's side of the family came from Kansas, and my grandfather took a homestead north of Maybelle, about 8 miles north of Maybelle, off of County Road 19. And so we've been, as a family, in Moffat County for over 100 years. Well, the government passed what they call the Homestead Act, and they allowed anybody that wanted to for a price, and it was a very minimal amount of money. But you had to live on the land 5 years, and you had to farm 20% of the acreage that you applied for, and you could apply for 320 acres. And people had to cut the brush and work the ground, and after 5 years they could apply for what they called a patent, which is the title to the homestead that they were on. And it had a legal description that is described. The land is divided up into townships and sections. And then the part of the section that they applied for, they got the patent of the land if they stayed 5 years, and if they farmed 20% of the land and fenced it and built they had to pay a fee, but it wasn't much of a fee. It was like 25 cents an acre or something. Today, consider a shack rather than a house. It's hard to explain the difference between the houses we have today and what they called houses years ago. My family still has the land that homesteaded. My grandfather homesteaded north of Maybelle, and my dad homesteaded up on Black Mountain. And both places are still in the ranch. None of the buildings are all, they were not the type of buildings that withstood. They were log, most of them were log, and they didn't withstand the rigors of time. Tucker Street, I know, over on the block east of here, or 2 blocks east of here, is named for Tucker that homesteaded out on where the power plant sits today. And his son was a professor at CSU, or it was Colorado A&M at that time, but he was a professor there. And his daughter married a fellow in, one of his daughters married a fellow in Roswell, New Mexico. But I don't know the rest of the family. And Breeze's lived out in Breeze Basin, and they had a homestead out by Breeze. And the Rose family homesteaded over on the east side of town, and the barn that sits out at the fairgrounds on the east side of town is the Rose barn. The Greens homesteaded where the library is today. All the houses, there was 2 houses there, and both of them are gone. Ranny Street, the Rannys homesteaded here in part of the town of Craig on the west side was part of the Ranny homestead. Southwest part of the town was the Ranny homestead. And then they had some of the rest of the family homesteaded north of Craig. Taylor's homesteaded out. Trying to think of somebody that know it's where Donnie Cook has this place. They homesteaded that place, and some others in that general area there. The person that was responsible for bringing the railroad to Craig was named David Moffett. And Moffett County in 1912 became Moffett County. They divided Routt County because the people in the west end of Routt County didn't like riding all the way to Hans Peak. It took several days and difficult days horseback to get there. And so they the politicians decided to break Moffett County off, and the carries from the carry ranch was between here and Hayden. There's I don't know how to explain it, but about halfway, or a little over, after you cross the railroad bridge and go up, there's a place where there's a ranch that's off to the left, and there's a lot of flatter land. And the Carries had that, and they didn't. He was in the state, one of the Carries was in the state legislature, and he didn't like the fact that the guys in the west end of the county was trying to change where the county seat was, so they divided the county. And that's why all the Carry Ranch ended up in Routt County, and that's why the east line of Moffett County is jagged. It's not a straight line. It's moved back and forth, so all the Carry property ended up in Routt County. Glenn Sherman, who was the chief of police here in town before the present chief of police, his family had a Taylor place, and just about every Saturday night, Friday and Saturday night, we would go out there and we'd clean the ice, and we'd have an ice skating party, and we'd hitch up a team and have a snow sled ride with a team of horses. And Mrs. Sherman always had hot chocolate and cookies when we got back, and I think that was probably as good a time as we ever had. I've lived through my whole life. We've been involved in ranching, sheep and cows, and so I've spent all my life working with animals. We lived in, I have to think of that. In 1935, the fall of 1935, I started the first grade in the Yampa school. And Marines lived we lived where Dr. Gochi has her office. We lived in that house. And the Greens lived across the street, and he was deaf. And you could hear him talk all over the area when he talked because he couldn't hear, and they called him Whispering Green. No, I went to school in the Yampa building, and on Bree Street there was a schoolhouse, and I went to school there. It's gone. They've tore it down, but it was a brick. They both were brick all day in the classroom. Being a family that was in the livestock business, we moved from down one the western end of the county to the eastern end of the county. And as a result, we ended up living in Craig, which had a winter term of school, and I didn't go to school out in the country schools that a lot of the people went to. I was able to go to school in Craig. But there was a difference. The fact that my folks moved back and forth, it was difficult to go to one school and then change and go to another. It wasn't really difficult, but it was a problem getting to school and home from school. My family only had a pickup. We didn't have a car. And it was the first one I remember my father having was a 1935 Dodge pickup, which is a lot different from the pickups today, a lot smaller, and the roads. The first time I went to Denver, when I was in the first grade in fall, I started school in fall of 1935, the road from Craig to Idaho Springs was either dirt or gravel, and Idaho Springs was the first paved road that I got involved with, or got to see. Two things, well, a lot of things have changed. On our ranch, all the cows we had, we kept down in the lower country on the Snake River in that area. And as time's gone by, we bring them up into the high country now, and the sheep travel from the lower country to the high country. So that hasn't changed, but instead of trailing on the roads, we truck. Trucking's taking place, and trails on the road. The highway between here and Mayville used to be covered with sheep, spring and fall, and a few cows. And out north, there's people trail both classes of livestock up and down the highway, but today you don't see very few. You see one once in a while, somebody else trail a little ways, but not very often. Everybody's gone to trucks because there's a lot more traffic. It's a lot harder to move. The first fences were mostly barbed wire. And I can remember a time or two when it rained and when there was a lot of thunder and lightning, that you'd see balls of fire going down the fence line. And the fences weren't grounded. And by grounded, I mean they had some metal that went into the ground that took the electricity off of the fence and took it into the ground. And today we do, and a lot of people do, use electric fences. I think that the thing that a lot of people don't understand is change takes place out on the land every day. And little things happen that nobody can explain, but things happen. So there's a force at work out there that changes things, whether we like it or not. Things happen out there that you can't explain. I think that's interesting as much as anything.